publicity by inaction at what is going on. He himself said there's a massive prison camp being constructed in the south of Gaza. He knows that leading genocide scholars from across the world now are ringing the alarm bells, and yet he has the temerity to show up to this House, wave his chequebook as if it's going to salve his conscience. Can he not see that his inaction and, frankly, cowardice is making this country irrelevant? Can he also not see the personal risk to him, given our international obligations, that he may end up at the Hague because of his inaction? And finally, really frankly, an appeal to the Labour backbench is relevant. Can he also not see the personal risk to him, given our international obligations, that he may end up at the Hague because of his inaction? And finally, really frankly, an appeal to the Labour backbenchers. We can't get your leadership to change their minds. Only you can, if you organise and insist on change.
Before I bring in the Foreign Secretary, can I just remind members that we have got other business to proceed to tonight, so please keep questions and answers short. Foreign Secretary.
I understand the fury that the right honourable gentleman feels.
So please keep questions and answers short. Foreign Secretary.
I understand the fury that the right honourable gentleman feels. But I have to tell him, I understand the fury that the right honourable gentleman feels. But I have to tell him that it demeans his argument when he personalises it in the way that he does, and it is not, and it's unbecoming and not something that the House expects, particularly of more senior members.
Alex Ballinger.
And it's unbecoming and not something that the House expects, particularly of more senior members.
Alex Ballinger.
Deputy Speaker, we've seen again images of children dying of starvation and malnutrition, and this comes after months of warnings by the UN system about the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza. I welcome the Foreign Secretary's announcement of more aid, but we know the GHF will not allow more UK aid in. He said to me 10 days ago at the Foreign Affairs Committee that if there was not a ceasefire, he would consider further action against Israel. As we've seen, the Israelis respond to calls for a ceasefire by launching a new offensive in Deir el-Balah. What further actions will we take to try and end this catastrophic situation?
Can I just say to my honourable friend that we have actually been able to get some further aid in with the World Food Programme, and of course that's important. And it is also right to say that with our funding of UK Med, we have been able to save lives, and of course we must endeavour every single day to make the humanitarian situation better.
Richard Ford.
Of UK Med, we have been able to save lives, and of course we must endeavour every single day to make the humanitarian situation better.
Richard Ford.
Of UK Med, we have been able to save lives, and of course we must endeavour every single day to make the humanitarian situation better.
Richard Ford.
Deputy Speaker, the Foreign Secretary appeared before the Foreign Affairs Committee on the 8th of July and was asked what would happen if we do not see a ceasefire in Gaza in the coming weeks. He was further asked whether the British government would take further measures against Israel. The Foreign Secretary was pensive and said yes. The British government would be taking further measures if the abomination in Gaza continued. Can he tell the House what those further measures are, or at the very least, when we might see that?
Yeah. Well, can I say to the Honourable Gentleman, we are doing everything we can, supporting our Qatari, Egyptian and US friends to get a ceasefire, and he will understand that in looking closely at these issues, even if we are contemplating further measures, they work more effectively if you can coordinate allies.
Betty Gilbert.
Madam Deputy Speaker. The ground invasion of Deir el-Balah is the latest to add to the daily attacks of Gazans and further evidence that the conflict has gone too far. The Israeli foreign ministers have already rejected a joint statement signed by 31 countries, including our governments. Can the Foreign Secretary outline what additional specific steps he will take with others to bring about a ceasefire and secure aid to starving Gazans?
Well, can I say to the honourable friend, I set out in my speech the action that this government has taken, and I stand by it. I regret that we have not brought the ceasefire. I have set out also the more aid that we are attempting to get in and how we're supporting the Palestinian people, including the Palestinian Authority, and I stand by that.
Stephen Flynn.
Madam Deputy Speaker, on the Foreign Secretary's watching in his statement today, he has refused to call it a genocide. He's refused to...
Stephen Flynn.
Madam Deputy Speaker, on the Foreign Secretary's watching in his statement today, he has refused to call it a genocide. He's refused to end all arms sales to Israel, and of course he continues to refuse to recognise the state of Palestine. So here's something he could do. On his watch, just 2 wee kids who've been bombed or shot by the Israeli forces have been evacuated to the UK for medical treatment. Now, the First Minister of Scotland wrote to the Prime Minister saying that we stand ready to provide hospital treatment to those children. Shamefully, the Prime Minister hasn't even bothered could do. On his watch, just 2 wee kids who've been bombed or shot by the Israeli forces have been evacuated to the UK for medical treatment. Now, the First Minister of Scotland wrote to the Prime Minister saying that we stand ready to provide hospital treatment to those children. Shamefully, the Prime Minister hasn't even bothered to respond. So will he do what his boss won't and commit the UK to making sure that children treatment to those children? Shamefully, the Prime Minister hasn't even bothered to respond. So will he do what his boss won't and commit the UK to making sure that children who've been bombed by Israel are treated?
Order, Foreign Secretary.
Can I say to honourable gentlemen that we have suspended arms sales that could be used in Gaza? And he should look closely at our export licensing regime, because much of it is not about arms. It's about, for example, equipment that we send to support NGOs and others who are in the area. And of course, I'm happy to look with the Home Secretary at what more we can do for children who are suffering.
Tansing 60.
Support NGOs and others who are in the area. And of course, I'm happy to look with the Home Secretary at what more we can do for children who are suffering.
Tansing 60.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Ministers say it's for the courts to decide whether genocide has occurred in Gaza, but the Genocide Convention is aimed primarily at prevention. And the ICJ has already found there's a plausible risk of genocide and advised that all states must act collectively to prevent it. While the occupying Israeli forces are accelerating the building of illegal settlements in the West Bank, the scenes in Gaza are horrific, with almost 1,000 people being killed by the IDF just while seeking aid. We're seeing the scenes in Gaza are horrific, with almost 1,000 people being killed by the IDF just while seeking aid. We're seeing the scenes in Gaza are horrific, with almost 1,000 people being killed by the IDF just while seeking aid. We're seeing the starvation being used as a weapon, forced displacement of Gazans, the mass civilian deaths, and senior Israeli officials are using dehumanising language while proposing to concentrate Gazans into a mass detention camp. So, Foreign Secretary, when will the government take decisive action with international partners to prevent genocide?
What can I say to my honourable friend, and he prays and aid the law in terms of plausibility in breach of international humanitarian law. If he looks at my statement back in September, I assessed that there was a clear risk of breaching international humanitarian law, and it's for that reason that I suspended arms sales.
I am aiming to finish this statement around.
Back in September, I assessed that there was a clear risk of breaching international humanitarian law, and it's for that reason that I suspended arms sales.
I am aiming to finish this statement around 7:45, so people will be able to see. I don't think I'll be able to get everybody in with the length of questions. David Mundell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I mean, everybody condemns the deaths as people queue for aid. But this aid system that was enforced is only possible because of the support of the United States in its delivery. So what is the Foreign Secretary doing to persuade the United States that this is not the way to deliver aid into Gaza? What is the Foreign Secretary doing to persuade the United States that this is not the way to deliver aid into Gaza?
Well, I want to reassure him that I have made representations to Secretary of State Rubio about my concerns with the aid system, and I've done that alongside many European foreign ministers and members of the G7.
John Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I recently met with the mother of Oz Daniel.
To avoid digital threats, just turn on NordVPN. Improve your protection against online trackers, malicious websites, and malware-ridden downloads. Get NordVPN.
He loved Guns N' Roses by Hamas on the 7th of October.
John Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I recently met with the mother of Oz Daniel, a 19-year-old who was murdered by Hamas on the 7th of October, and his dead body was dragged into Gaza. Oz loved to play music, he loved Guns N' Roses, and was a brilliant guitar player. This is about a mum who just wants her dead son's body bringing home. A senior US official has said that Israel is bending over backwards to agree a ceasefire, and it is Hamas that is blocking it. Will the Foreign Secretary set out what pressure the government is applying to Hamas by Qatar and Egypt to agree a ceasefire and to bring the hostages home?
The honourable gentleman is right to the extent that the challenge faced on the ceasefire has been principally that Hamas do not want to pause, and the Israeli government has said that they do want to pause. There's also been discussion of what withdrawal we would see of the IDF within Israel, and of course changing the humanitarian aid system. That is why a ceasefire has remained stuck. But it is my hope that once the Knesset rises on the 22nd, we will move to a ceasefire.
Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Foreign Secretary follows the diplomatic path, will he ensure that in the discussions of the two-state solution, it is borne in mind that not only does the state of Palestine exist in that two-state solution, but also Israel's neighbours do need to recognise Israel's right to exist?
Yes, I will.
Laura Kirksmith.
Najwa Ahmed Fati Radwan and Mohammed Hassan Yusuf Dawood are just two of the tens of thousands of Palestinian children who have been killed in Gaza. Many of their names were read out over the course of 12 hours at a really powerful vigil that I joined in Aylesbury Town Centre this weekend. Yet today that list of dead children has likely just got longer with Israel's assault on Deir al-Balah. Will the Foreign Secretary say to his Israeli counterparts, enough is enough?
Can I reassure my honourable friend that I said that this morning to my Israeli foreign counterpart?
Before I call the next speaker, I heard some unacceptable comments directed at a member in this chamber, and I will not be having that. So until I find out from the clerks who said those words, we are investigating it. So please do be assured that I will investigate it. Dr. Andrew Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Foreign Secretary at the beginning of his remarks mentioned the savagery that's unfolding in southern Syria and said that he'd spoken to his Syrian interlocutor, Minister Shabani, about it. Has he spoken to Tel Aviv about it? Since the only country that has visibly come to the assistance of the Druze for all the criticism that has been rightly aimed at it is Israel. And if he has, can he say what his assessment is of the wisdom or otherwise of the action that Israel has taken?
Well, can I say to the right honourable gentleman that the UK is clear that we expect Israel to adhere to their commitment that their presence in the area of separation in the south is both limited and temporary. And that I did press the Foreign Minister, the Israeli Foreign Minister, on their activity, which I worry destabilises the situation further.
Debbie Abrahams.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I recognise the Foreign Secretary's labours to get as many international allies on board, and I recognise the importance of that. But clearly, we must do more. This is not enough. Given Israel's flaunting of international law and the devastating consequences of that, including, I understand, that Israeli soldiers are reporting being told to kill children, to point and shoot. It's completely unacceptable. So as a starting point, perhaps we could ensure that we are refusing entry to the Israeli Air Force Chief to visit the Royal International Air Tattoo, as well as others having said, how are we going to get children who need care over here?
Well, I said that I will look at the issue of what more we can do should children require medical aid in our own country. If what she has said is correct, then that would constitute a war crime, very clearly. We cannot have soldiers turning their guns on children, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on any decision that might come to me. Soldiers turning their guns on children, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on any decision that might come to me. Turning their guns on children, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on any decision that might come to me.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week I hosted Keith and Aviva Siegel, both of whom were hostages and were released. The previous week I met families of hostages who all pleaded with all of us to get the hostages released.
What are you smiling at?
Have a look at this. I've just checked to see if we were affected by that PCP scandal, right?
4 days without and were released. The previous week, I met families of hostages who all pleaded with all of us to get the hostages released. They've now been in captivity for 654 days without any access from the International Red Cross. So will the Foreign Secretary call out Hamas to enable the International Red Cross to go and see those hostages and to make sure they're being treated humanely?
Well, the honourable gentleman is right, and I did say in my statement that Hamas are making hay with the chaos that exists on the ground, and it is quite wrong to restrict the support of organisations like the Red Cross and the Red Crescent.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister responded to my questions on Gaza in Liaison Committee this afternoon by saying we need a ceasefire and we need it straight away. The situation on the ground is intolerable. How will we get that ceasefire when the Israeli government has already rejected the statement by Foreign Secretary and his allied ministers as disconnected from reality? The will of the House is clear on this matter, that it wants action, not words. Why is he not hearing that?
Well, can I say to
the will of the House is clear on this matter, that it wants action, not words. Why is he not hearing that?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend, and I thank him for his long-standing campaigning on these issues, of course I'm hearing the strength of feeling in the House. How could you not? And of course, the Israeli government can see the strength of feeling in the House. He knows the list of actions that the UK has taken. He knows the work that we're doing with close allies. He knows, too, that we have not brought this war to an end. And he will be familiar with the work that we're doing with countries like Qatar and Egypt and the United States to bring about the ceasefire.
Alison Bennett.